Hey there, and welcome everyone to today's session. We'll be getting started in just under 10 minutes now, about 8 minutes away from the top of the hour here in Washington, D.C. See, we've got a few people signing in. Welcome. If you can do me a favor, if you're settling in, if you've got your audio connected, just give me a quick yes or a quick thumbs up in the chat. That way I know when we're about to get started, we're good to rock and roll. I'm going to go and pause the recording for now. That way, when we get things started in about 10 minutes, we'll be able to dive right in. Hey there, and welcome everyone to our very exciting session today, focusing on Goodshuffle Pro and our connection with QuickBooks Online. If we haven't had the chance of speaking before, my name is Colin Connor. I'm the customer success lead for Goodshuffle Pro. I've been with the company since 2018, back in the time of the Mastodons. And as you can tell, I am from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada originally. I'm currently in Washington, D.C., but I do hail from the Great White North, famous for its palm trees, warm breezes, and nice sandy beaches. So what we're going to be covering today is setting up the basics of the integration, making sure that you know where and how to find the crucial pieces of information before you get the integration active with QuickBooks Online. We're going to review the journey of an invoice, how information syncs over, and where to find that information in QuickBooks Online. And we're also going to touch on some quick reporting tools within QuickBooks Online. What reports are available, how we can customize them, and give you some examples. We're also going to have some time toward the end to focus on any questions that you may have. Hey, thanks for letting me know, Scott. Always a pleasure to have a fellow Canadian in the session. That's actually great to know. If there are any Canadian vendors in the session here today, let me know. There's a couple additional resources I can send your way or show you how to find those when we're off the call here. So let me go ahead and share another screen here. Just going to get the screen moved over here. So the journey of the integration starts as soon as a project is signed or marked as signed. So as you're building new projects, as you're sending new quotes, don't worry, that information will not sync over into QuickBooks Online. It is only until the project is signed or marked as signed that will start the journey from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online. The other thing I want to mention is if you have yet to activate the integration on your side, any projects, any information created prior to activating the integration, that information will not sync over into QuickBooks Online. It'll only occur after you activate the integration, and any newly created projects, those will be the ones that are set to automatically sync when the project is signed or marked as signed by your team. With that in mind, if anyone here has existing orders within Goodshuffle Pro, you're like, oh, Colin, it would be so great if I could just sync everything over into QuickBooks Online. Don't worry, we can absolutely help you with that. If you'd like to learn more about syncing everything in your Goodshuffle Pro account, you can always have your account owner reach out to us in the chat, and we'll be happy to take the steps from there to making sure everything can sync over in one go. So here in Goodshuffle Pro, and if I'm looking away from y'all, I just have another screen set up here. I'm not ignoring you, just want to showcase some of the features we have within the integration. So what we're looking at here is we have a brand spanking new project in Goodshuffle Pro. We have it signed by the client. So that is what is going to trigger the sync of information from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite tools regarding the integration here. If we click sync up here in the top right-hand corner, we can see we've got this nifty little, I call it a jump out arrow or a jump out box. It's a way that we can quickly jump into information into QuickBooks Online. So to navigate to the invoice in QuickBooks, simplicity itself, just click that little box, and that's going to bring us directly into the invoice in QuickBooks Online. So here's where we can see we've got the invoice in QuickBooks Online. What I'm going to be doing to get us started is breaking down the invoice and the journey of the invoice step by step. That way you know what options are available, and you'll also be able to know what options can be customized and controlled on your side as well. So starting up here in the top left, we've got the beautiful invoice number here in the top left-hand corner. As you can see, this is going to match the project ID number in Goodshuffle Pro. This is going to make your communication with your bookkeeper seamless. You're both going to be speaking the same language, using the same reference numbers, and that way you'll be able to streamline your communication between either your bookkeeper to you or you to your bookkeeper. The one thing I will say is this is one of the many options and controls that we do offer with this integration. To learn more about what other options are available within the integration, I'm going to click my name in the top right-hand corner, click into Account. From your account, you're going to head to Integrations, and you're going to scroll down toward the bottom. This is where we can see we've got the different controls and the different settings for the QuickBooks Online integration. So to show you real quick here, we have this first option here to sync the QuickBooks invoice numbers with the Goodshuffle Pro project numbers. Got to be honest with you folks, this is something that I want to throw all 150 Canadian pounds of me behind. It's just going to make your life easier. Imagine you're talking with your bookkeeper and you're finally speaking the same language, a connection at last. This is going to make it easy to ensure that when you provide your bookkeeper with an invoice number, or if your bookkeeper has a question about an invoice in QuickBooks, they can give you the exact reference number you're looking for. So this is where you can control if you like to sync the Goodshuffle Pro project numbers with the QuickBooks invoice numbers. The other thing we can do here that I will mention is if you're just getting started with the integration between Goodshuffle Pro and QuickBooks Online, you can also import your contacts from QuickBooks into Goodshuffle Pro. Even if you already have the contacts or some contacts existing within Goodshuffle Pro, I would strongly suggest importing your contacts from QuickBooks into Goodshuffle Pro or syncing the two. That way, when you're viewing the contacts within Goodshuffle Pro, you could quickly jump into the existing contacts record within QuickBooks Online. So moving back into the invoice in QuickBooks Online here, we can see that we've got the customer up here in the top left. One of the unique things about the way that invoices in QuickBooks are structured is if you're working for a larger company, like Disney in this case, the primary customer is going to be that company, Disney, Netflix, Pepsi, Goodshuffle, what have you. That's going to be the primary customer. The sub-customer is going to be the contact that works for that company on that specific invoice. So for example, I could see Jerry is a sub-customer of Disney, and he's who I'm working with on this project. But I can also see that Steve Rogers is a sub-customer of Disney as well. So just to show you another quick way of highlighting this, back in the project in Goodshuffle Pro, some of you may be more familiar with how this relationship works within Goodshuffle Pro. We can see the contact is Jerry, but his company is Disney. So it's just a slightly different way of navigating or negotiating the primary and sub-customer. But the good news is when that information comes into QuickBooks Online, it'll automatically make that adjustment, make it super easy to know which contact you're working with on a given job. So to give you some examples here, you can run reports. You could run an aging report or an aging summary based off of all of the contacts who may work for Disney just by viewing Disney as the umbrella. You can still drill down to the individual contacts that work for Disney, but definitely looking at the umbrella here will make it easy to recognize the activity overall for a company, regardless of the specific contact on an order. I see we do have a question here in the chat. That's a great question, Eric. I'll definitely take a look at that toward the question session toward the end of our time here today. You can also enter in any questions that you have into the Q&A pod. Perfect. I see it there on my side. Great. So we've got the primary customer and the sub-customer looking good. There's a couple fields here in the invoice in QuickBooks Online These fields, many of them can be customized based off of what information you'd like to have presented on the invoice in QuickBooks Online. So for example, the billing address, I want that brought over. So that's going to be brought over from Goodshuffle Pro. The next piece of information we're going to cover here is the invoice date. The invoice date is one of the settings that you can control within Goodshuffle Pro. So I'm going to move back to my integration settings here. So this here toward the bottom is where we can control the invoice date of the invoices in QuickBooks Online. So they can either be the logistics start. So for example, the date of delivery or the first date of the event, or the date that the client signed the invoice. This really comes down to how you run your reports within QuickBooks Online, and I'll be touching on a few examples when we look into the reports that are available within QuickBooks Online. What I would suggest, or I'll give you an example here. So let's say that Casey sends me an invoice and I sign it today. The project may not be until December 2022. So if I run my reports, or if I set the invoice date to be logistics start, the date on the invoice will be December 2022. If I set it for contract signature, the date will be today. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, let's say, hey, I'm a picky guy. I know what I like, and I need to make some adjustments. I need to make some tweaks. I need to make some alterations to the invoice as we get closer and closer toward the event. So if I keep signing and re-signing and signing it again, that will move the invoice date if I'm basing it off of contract signature. So every time I sign, it's going to move the invoice date closer and closer to the event. This will impact the reports that you can generate within, or how your reports generate within QuickBooks Online, because an invoice that was there one day may not be there the next time you run it, because the invoice date has changed. What I would suggest is relying on logistics signature. This is going to be a more firm point in time and allow you to be a bit more, allow you to forecast a bit more, shall we say. Because that way you'll be able to see the invoices based off of the date of the event rather than when I signed it, because that may change as time goes by. Whereas the logistics start, unless I'm changing the date of the event, that will be a more firm point in time. And if anyone has any questions, or if anyone needs a hand, you can always let me know, especially after the session, if you or your bookkeeper have any additional questions. So as we can see here on this invoice, I'm basing it off of the logistics start, the start of the event, the first date or the delivery date of the event itself. The due date, this is going to be determined by the payment policy that you have within Goodshuffle Pro on that specific project. So for example, the date or the event itself started October 31st, and they needed to pay their final balance by the 24th, a few days before the event. Scrolling down a little bit more here, we now get to the line items on the invoice in QuickBooks Online. So when you first integrate with Goodshuffle Pro and QuickBooks Online, there's going to be 3 default revenue categories, or 3 different revenue accounts created for your invoices that come over from Goodshuffle Pro. Those are product rentals. That is anything that has any product or package that has a daily, hourly, or flat rate. Product sales, that is any product or package with a purchase price, or any services, your labor, damage waiver, logistics, and so on. Some of you eagle-eyed folks out there might be saying, hey, Colin, how come yours looks a little different? How come yours is saying product rentals, sports and recreation, services, administrative services, other lawn and backyard games, and so on? Well, this is another one of the customizations that we can make with the integration with QuickBooks Online. So if we come back to our integration settings here, we can see that we can break revenue out by sales office and by item subcategory. So to give you some examples, if you have multiple locations for your business, multiple sales offices, you will likely need to know, how's my Chicago office performing versus my Orlando office versus my, heaven forbid, Winnipeg office. So that way you can see when the revenue is recognized in QuickBooks Online, how your product rentals performed in each one of these separate sales offices. We can also break out by revenue account by item subcategory. I'd say personally, this is the more popular option. This will allow you to run more specific or more granular reports within QuickBooks Online, allowing you to report on how did my chairs perform versus my linen versus my AV equipment and so on from within QuickBooks Online. You can, of course, run all of that detailed, rich, juicy reporting from within Goodshuffle Pro. It just depends on where you're more comfortable in doing your reporting. QuickBooks Online, of course, is more geared towards accounting level reports, whereas Goodshuffle Pro, as you know, is perfect for usage and revenue reports. Just depends on where you're more comfortable running those reports. So to show you some differences of how these different revenue accounts can be created or can be viewed, I'm going to come into my chart of accounts here in QuickBooks Online. So as you can see here, when I search product rentals in my chart of accounts, I can see I've got product rentals accessories, product rentals amps. And I can also see I've got product rentals amps Hershey, product rentals amps Portland, Washington, and so on. So you can activate both, so that way you can see how your amps performed in your Hershey office versus your Portland office versus your Washington office. Again, just depends on where you run your reports and what questions you're trying to answer. So as you can see here, I've got these different revenue accounts. And if you choose to not break out, or if you choose just to use the defaults, you'll just see product rentals, product sales, and services. Those will be what you need to get you started. And just to echo what I mentioned, touched on before, those revenue accounts will be created automatically. You do not need to manually create or manually wire in any revenue accounts here in QuickBooks Online. Question for those of you who are in the room with us right now. Does anyone have existing revenue accounts in QuickBooks Online that you may want to map to? So for example, I've been using QuickBooks Online for decades, years. I have my revenue accounts, my product revenue accounts that I want the revenue accounts that Goodshuffle creates to feed into. Does anyone have revenue accounts already set up in QuickBooks Online? Great. Looks like we got a couple people already have it. Great. See some hands going up. Great. So if you are wanting to have these brand spanking new revenue accounts from Goodshuffle Pro feed into those existing revenue accounts, super simple. We're here in our chart of accounts. And all you need to do is find the revenue account that Goodshuffle has created or Goodshuffle is feeding into. Click this little drop-down arrow, edit, and then just click to mark it as a sub-account. And then just type in whatever revenue account you want it to feed into. Super easy. That way you'll be able to report similar to like a primary and a sub customer, as I touched on before. You'll be able to report on the umbrella, so wherever parent account you're feeding into, but you can also run the reports on the more the child or the sub accounts as well. Cool. So back in the invoice here in QuickBooks Online. So we can see we have the different revenue accounts here, product rentals, product services, and so on. If we look here toward the bottom, this is one of the most important pieces I wanted to cover here today. When invoices are brought from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online, we include tax as a line item on the invoice. This way, we can support the common use case of a lot of our users where a single item may need to have multiple taxes per single item. So for example, you might have a drink machine that needs sales tax, use tax, food and beverage tax, entertainment tax. All these different tax types can be applied to a single item in Goodshuffle Pro. That isn't supported with QuickBooks Online. So that's why we break the revenue accounts or the tax types out as a line item on the invoice. The important thing to keep in mind here is because we break it out as these separate line items, we do not connect with the tax center within QuickBooks Online. With that in mind, you can, of course, still run a detailed and comprehensive tax report within Goodshuffle Pro, but we do not connect with the tax center within QuickBooks Online. Again, within QuickBooks, taxes, there can only be one tax type assigned per item or per order on the invoice in QuickBooks. So we, in order to support the use case of many of our users, we do not connect with the tax center within QuickBooks. Great. We can also see here toward the bottom, we do include any merchant fees that were paid by the client as a line item here as well. Again, any of these expense or liability accounts, those are going to be automatically created. You do not need to worry about creating or mapping any of those revenue accounts as well, or expense accounts, I should say. Here toward the bottom is where we have a nice handy message of the statement. So again, you can also, or your bookkeeper will also be able to use this to let you know the exact project name as well as the project ID number. So again, speaking the same language, you're on the same page, everyone's speaking together, working together, streamlining your communication there. Here toward the very bottom is where we have some quick click links right back into the signed version of the invoice that came over from Goodshuffle Pro. So if your bookkeeper is wanting to print off a copy of the QuickBooks invoice, they could always click here toward the bottom, and this is going to act as a record of every version of the invoice as it is signed and re-signed by the client, or marked as signed by your team. Any questions on the invoice side of things before we continue? I see we've got a couple of questions here. Let me see if I can answer any of them while we're chatting here. Great. It looks like Scott has a question regarding the balance sheet and how things show up there. We'll definitely tackle that while we focus on some of the reports here. Great question. So Eric had a question. Is the invoice number, or is the project number from Goodshuffle Pro, is that generated by QuickBooks or is that generated by Goodshuffle? Any project numbers are going to be first generated by Goodshuffle Pro. It'll be a unique ID that's assigned by Goodshuffle Pro, help you identify each unique project on your side. And then when that project is signed and syncs into QuickBooks Online, that'll match the project number, or the invoice will match the project number from Goodshuffle Pro. And also have a question, QuickBooks uses classes. Is this something Goodshuffle will utilize? We do not connect with classes in QuickBooks Online. We do connect with the revenue accounts, but definitely if you have some feedback or if you have specific use cases of how you use classes with your business, be happy to hear that and learn more. You could always send us a message in the chat. Be happy to take that to our team. Cool. All right, looks like we are good. Perfect. So we've tackled the invoice. Now, can folks give me a quick thumbs up, give me a quick hand raise? Are folks ready to move on to the exciting part of payments? Everyone's favorite part. We're getting paid for this order. Can you believe it? Yes. Excellent. Perfect. Excellent. I'm seeing some hands being raised. Beautiful. So when a payment is made, that payment will, of course, sync over from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online as soon as that payment is made. The one exception is with ACH payments. ACH payments will only show within QuickBooks Online when the payment has cleared. The reason being, ACH payments take 3 to 5 business days to clear. There is always the possibility that the payment may fail or it may not clear. So to avoid the payment being posted and then it fail and need to void or redact the payment, we only sync the payment for ACH payments, or the payment record for ACH payments, as soon as the payment clears. So definitely, if you accept ACH payments or if you have a history with ACH payments, you may be familiar with what I'm talking about with the clearing period. So just know that when that's brought over, it'll be officially cleared. So when payments are made, we're going to see that automatically match up with the invoice, with the corresponding invoice in QuickBooks Online. So we can see from the invoice in QuickBooks, because we're already here, make our life easy, we can click up here in the top right-hand corner, and we can see we've got these 3 payments made toward this project. These payment numbers, you guessed it, they're going to match the payment ID number in Goodshuffle Pro as well, making life easy. So just to show you another quick tool that we've got here, if we click back into, there we go, the project in Goodshuffle Pro, we're going to click into the billing tab. This is where we're going to see all the records of payments here. So if we want to view the payment record within QuickBooks Online, simplicity itself, click the little plus button here. And this is where we can see all the details of the payment, and this little jump out arrow, we can go and click that. And this is going to bring us, you guessed it, directly into the payment record in QuickBooks Online. So this is where we can see we've got the payment record. We're going to match the payment ID number. Great. Primary and sub customer. That's going to match as well. One thing I do want to mention here is that when payments sync from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online, we can see that they're being deposited to undeposited funds. You might be thinking, Colin, why is that? That's because when payments are made by your clients, credit card payments especially, are guaranteed to hit your bank within 2 business days. So the payment record will sync over automatically, and I'll show you what happens to move those funds out of undeposited funds in just a moment. So think of undeposited funds like that blue denim zipper bag that you may have used in the past, where you put all your cash and checks, zip it up, and you go off to the bank, and that's how you deposit it. Say, just put all this in my bank account. Undeposited funds is essentially that zipper bag that will hold or reserve any funds before they are deposited into your bank account. So the payment coming over, that's going to happen automatically. This is the same for online or offline payments. The difference here being online payments are payments processed through our integrated payment processor, Stripe, credit card payments, and ACH payments, for example. Offline payments are payments captured outside of our payment processor, Stripe. So for example, if you're accepting cash or check, or if you have an external terminal, those are going to be other examples of offline payments. Any payment captured outside of our payment processor, Stripe, is an offline payment. So both online, offline, those will sync over automatically from Goodshuffle into QuickBooks Online, making life easy. If we scroll through this list here, we can even see which invoice this payment is applied to. So that's going to happen automatically. That link between the payment and the invoice, match made in heaven, we can see that link happen right away. If we scroll down a little bit more here, we can see that there's a few details regarding this payment. So this is where we can see what project this payment was for. We can see the processing fees as well. So again, giving you all of the information you need about this payment in QuickBooks Online. So we've got the invoice, we've got the payment. You might be thinking, Colin, when do I get paid? When do I get that sweet, sweet money? Well, the time is now. So when payments are transferred or when deposits are made from Stripe, our payment processor, into your bank account, that will automatically create a deposit within QuickBooks Online. I got a question from Chris. Who puts the memos in there? Great question. Goodshuffle Pro will automatically include the memos, the memo notes. Any of those detail memo notes that you may have seen on the project, on the payment, and then as we'll see on the deposit, those will automatically be created by Goodshuffle Pro. Making your life easy here. Cool. So next up is the deposit. So the way that deposits work within Goodshuffle Pro and our payment processor Stripe is payments are collected over a 2-day rolling period. So all of the transactions, payments and refunds both, are rolled together into a deposit or a payout, and that lump sum is transferred into your bank account. As you can imagine, deposits can and often do contain transactions, payments, and refunds from multiple separate projects, multiple different clients, and different times as well. So once that lump sum is transferred into your bank account, a deposit will automatically be created within QuickBooks Online. So let's take a look here. So here we can see we've got this bank deposit. You can see it's automatically been created. It's going into our checking account. And we can see the amount here up in the top right. If we take a look just toward the bottom of my screen here, we can see that any online payments that were included within this deposit are going to be automatically included within this deposit. Again, no manual effort, saving you time, saving you effort, and also helping you avoid errors. It's going to automatically match or map the payments included within those deposits to the corresponding deposit. We can see a few more details here toward the right, the charge ID, the transaction, all those juicy details there. And if we scroll down here toward the bottom, this is where we can see when the merchant fees are going to be deducted from that deposit. So as you can recall, any processing fees were added to the invoice, and then they're taken out when the funds are transferred to our bank account. And here toward the bottom, again, a beautiful little note, little memo, giving us the payout ID number. So that way, again, everyone's speaking the same language. So what's happening here with the deposit, you may be wondering. So the deposit is the act of taking that blue denim zipper bag of those undeposited funds and moving it into your bank account, depositing or cashing those payments, those online payments. This is where we see the fork in the road between online and offline payments. As we discussed, online and offline payments will sync over into QuickBooks Online automatically. They'll all sync over and land in undeposited funds. The main difference is online payments, Stripe will know when those funds were deposited, so they'll automatically create a deposit for online payments. Offline payments, however, because you're getting cash, you're getting check, you might just open up your drawer and put a whole bunch of cash and check in there, and then on Friday, you'll get your big denim bag with the $sign on it, pull all the cash and check in there, sling it over your shoulder, and then you'll go to the bank to deposit it. As omnipotent as I like to make myself sound, Stripe and Goodshuffle Pro, we don't know when those offline deposits happen because those checks can sit in your drawer for a day, a week, a year, yipes, but we won't know when that deposit takes place. So the only time that you or your bookkeeper will need to take manual action on marking the deposits is when you are marking an offline deposit. The good news is it's super easy. What we can do, I'm just going to close this existing deposit here. What we can do is just click New, plus New, Bank Deposit. And this is where you could say, yeah, that's right. So I'm going to deposit these funds on, it was last Friday, and I know Carlos gave me a check, and then Dawn sent me some cash. And then, oh yeah, Scott sent me that check that I've been holding on for. Nobody tell Scott that I haven't cashed it yet. So what you can do is you can mark whichever offline payments are still sitting in undeposited funds. And then you can just click save and close. And that's how you can essentially move them from undeposited funds into your checking, savings, or whichever bank account you'd like to connect. Any questions on deposits? There's one more piece of the journey before we continue here. If anyone does have any questions, I'll definitely keep my eye on the chat here. Great. Question here, offline deposits. Do you have to do this, actually do this in QuickBooks and Goodshuffle? Good question. So the only place you'll need to do this is in QuickBooks Online. There's no place within Goodshuffle Pro to mark when offline payments have been deposited. It's just in QuickBooks Online. Cool. All right, so I'll show you the last piece of the journey here. I'll definitely circle back to any questions that may come up in the meantime. So the last part is when it comes time to reconciling or to matching those deposits. So when the deposit hits your bank is going to say, hey, we got a deposit for $1,000. Where did this money come from? QuickBooks Online will say, well, you've got this deposit in your account, either automatically created by Stripe and Goodshuffle Pro or created by your team for offline payments. And you'll be able to reconcile, or you'll be able to match the two. This can be done automatically. There is a lot of training and, for lack of a better word, machine learning that you can take advantage of in QuickBooks Online. So for example, it can automatically match or reconcile deposits based off of their amount, the date, the reference number. There's a few other pieces that that may come in handy, or maybe different depending on what version of QuickBooks you're using, of course. But the good news is QuickBooks is super smart, and you can train it to be even smarter as well. So this is where we can come in, and I can see my bank is saying, hey, Colin, you got a deposit for $200. Which deposit has this come from? So for example, just to say it a different way, my bank is showing me a transaction record that, hey, we got a deposit for $200. I can then say where that money came from, which deposit that came from. So as you can see, I can see it's automatically suggesting a match. It's found a matched record with the amount and the date. And then if there's any description, you'll see that toward the bottom. And then we could just confirm and reconcile the two. This is an especially important part if you're just getting started with QuickBooks Online. Matching and making sure you have those deposits being matched with the record from Goodshuffle Pro is essential to make sure that the cash is flowing from undeposited funds into your bank account, and you're not seeing both records separately. I've got a couple questions regarding payments within QuickBooks Online. So I've got a question from Linda. Can we still mark the invoice paid in Goodshuffle for a check payment? Of course. Any payments that you record within Goodshuffle Pro, online or offline payments, like a check, that will sync over automatically into QuickBooks Online. Let me know if that helps answers your question, Linda. And Carlos has a great question. Perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Or pardon me. The invoice number and the deposit number will be different because of the fees. That is a great question. So when the deposit occurs, it's not necessarily looking at the invoice amount or the invoice number. It's looking at the payment amount. that payment amount can include Stripe's fees if you are passing those fees on to your client. So to give you an example, let's take a look here. So for example, I've got this payment record here, and I can see that this payment includes $46.63 from Stripe's fees, from Stripe, our payment processor. So when that money hits my bank account, I don't receive the whole amount. I receive the amount here minus any of those fees. And those fees will be deducted when the deposit hits my bank account. So just to show you here, I'll pull up the invoice again here. One moment. So when we receive the deposit, that's when we can see which payments we've included. So again, these payment amounts are including Stripe's fees. That way, when it's transferred, I just receive the amount that was paid toward my projects. So to give you a nice clean example here, let's say I get paid $100 and $1 in fees. I'm going to see a $101 payment be recorded within QuickBooks Online. When that money is transferred to my bank account, I'm going to see $101 in the payment total here, minus $1. So that way I just get the total amount that is paid toward the invoice total, the project total. And Rachel's got a question. You can automatically match. So the matching of payment to the invoice, that is automatic. The matching of payment to the deposit, that is automatic only for online payments. The only time you'll need to do a manual match or manual adjustment is if you are working with payments like cash, check, any offline payments. You'll need to create the deposit in QuickBooks Online and add or match which payments are included within that deposit. And I see we've got some questions here regarding what a deposit is. A deposit is just another way of saying a payout or a transfer funds from Stripe into your bank account. They call them deposits in QuickBooks Online. In Goodshuffle Pro, we call it a payout, transfer. Perfect. All right, let's take a look into some quick questions here. So Scott, you had a question regarding viewing the balance sheet so you can track trends and you can track what's happening within your account. It's a great question. So let's go and close this here. And what we can see is we can come into our reports. And there's a ton of reporting that you could do within QuickBooks Online. I'm going to show you some of the most popular ones. That way you can see some examples, and definitely even within these existing reports, the customization that you can do is seemingly endless. And Dawn, I definitely see your question. I'll show you where you can find the answers to those types of questions in our help article library toward the end of the call here. So reviewing the balance sheet here, this is a great way for you to track your assets versus your liabilities. So for example, this is where I can see all of the different things that I may have or that I may own for my company. Let me just try to find a good example here for my example company. There we go. Great. So I'm just running it for all dates. That way we can see all the information that I may have in my example account here. So for example, if I want to see how the progress of my bank accounts have gone or what the different periods I may want to run in. This is where I can see a quick summary of the balance of my checking versus my savings account. And one of the important details here, one of the things I should mention before we continue, is you always want to make sure you are clarifying which accounting method you want to use. So with many of these reports within QuickBooks Online, you can choose if it's based off of a cash or an accrual basis. So cash will show you a summary based off of when the payment was made within QuickBooks Online, or accrual, which will look at the invoice date or the date where the goods and services are changing hands. So again, just depends on what accounting method you use, again, to align you more closely with the generally accepted accounting principles. I'd recommend the accrual basis. So Scott, I know you had a question reviewing the balance sheet. There's a lot you can get from this, but in a sense, this is where you can see assets versus liabilities. So that way, if you want to see any of the expenses like the taxes or any of the other accounts payable or liability accounts that you may have in QuickBooks Online, this is where you can see where those funds are going, or you can see the trends here as well. One thing I will mention, one of my favorite parts about the reports within QuickBooks Online, is that, okay, you're telling me this is the total amounts for accounts payable. This is how much I owe to another person. But if you click into here, click that number, this is where you can see a summary of all of the details, all of the invoices, all of the bills that may feed into that one amount. And Scott, let me know if that helps answer your question, or if there's a more specific question regarding the balance sheet I can help you with. I'll keep an eye out on the chat here. But back in our reports here, this is where we can also see a quick P&L. This is going to be a great way for you to see which revenue accounts are feeding or are sustaining you and your business. So for example, this is where I can see for a given period, the January 1st to December 7th. And again, I'm running off of accrual. So it's generating these numbers based off of which events or which events have taken place or which events have started during this time period. So this is where I can see, looks like I've got a healthy amount in my backdrops. So that's, again, giving me some actionable information to know which items I may want to restock or which items I may want to reinvest in at the end of the period. Oh, gotcha. Got some further questions, Scott, here. Gotcha. The total sales of tents versus radios versus tables. Got it. That will be done in the profit and loss report here within QuickBooks Online. You can also run a similar report within Goodshuffle Pro. That way you can see gross revenue for those different categories and subcategories. But yeah, definitely total sales based off of item or item subcategory. This will be done within the P&L report here. And the reason being is that these different revenue accounts are considered an income account, and income is what feeds into P&L. I believe assets and liabilities are what feed into the balance sheet. Great. Same thing goes. If we want to know which invoices have fed this backdrop income, let's go and click there. And we can see all these different invoices. We've got all that information right at our fingertips. Great. And yeah, a lot of these reports, there's a lot we can get into. I don't know how long you can stay long here, how long you have for to stick around here today. But definitely there's so much detail that you can get into the reports in QuickBooks Online. what I would definitely suggest is consider what questions you're wanting to answer, and we'll definitely help get you pointed in the right direction of which report you can use, what customization you could use, and then what information you can already find within Goodshuffle Pro if you want to run it from within there. So I know we had some questions regarding showing how to map revenue category and how you can control the settings there. What I'll do to take us home here is I'm going to head to help.goodshuffle.com. And this is going to be the best place to come should you have any questions on what we covered here today, or should you have any questions regarding the integration. One of the most important pieces here is, let's say, QuickBooks Online. How can I do that? You can go and type that in, hit enter, and we can see we've got a article here. I'll take you through with screenshots, articles. There's some with GIFs and videos, whatever you need to help get you started. And I'll take you through step by step. And Dawn, to answer your question regarding mapping revenue accounts, let's say I know Colin mentioned something about feeding revenue accounts from one thing into another, but again, his Winnipeg accent, it's so surreal. I can only understand every third word. What we could do here is I don't know, map revenue QuickBooks. I think that's what he said. Great. So how can I change the revenue accounts used in QuickBooks Online? So this will take you through how you can customize the different settings. And then there'll be additional resources and more information regarding creating the sub accounts here toward the bottom. There we go. Perfect. Thanks, Don. And looks like we got a couple of questions from Scott here. You have history in QuickBooks Online. You just started with Goodshuffle Pro, so it's easier to look historically in QuickBooks. Perfect. So what we can do is within QuickBooks Online, just going to come back here. Back in our reports. Within QuickBooks Online, we'll definitely want to use the profit and loss, and we could do profit and loss by month, year-to-date comparison. There's a lot of different customizations that you can throw on these reports, so that way you can look at how revenue has changed year over year. And if you have questions or if you need a hand within QuickBooks Online, by all means, let us know. We'll be happy to get you pointed in the right direction from our side as well. And a question from Casey, the $29 per month is just to integrate, correct? So you will need an existing QuickBooks Online account, and then the $29 is to integrate from Goodshuffle Pro into QuickBooks Online, and you always have the option of saving 10% by switching to annual billing on the QuickBooks integration or your core subscription or any additional users that you may add. And folks, that's what I have for us here today. I know we've got about 5 minutes left, but what I would love to hear from the participants who are here with us today is, what is the one thing that you took away from today's session? What is the one thing that you learned, or maybe you're excited about sharing with your team? Or if there's something you want to learn more about, let me know. I'll stick around for another few minutes. But thanks everyone for being a part of today. Thanks for the feedback, Jake. And thank you, Rachel, Raphael, Scott. Thank you for your great questions. Lisa, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, everyone, for being a part of today, asking questions, being engaged. And definitely, if there was something that you took away, let me know. And I'll turn off the recording here so that way we can answer any remaining questions. And just remember how much time you're going to save with this integration. You're going to streamline creating those invoices, no more manual creation, no more stitching together of which payment went with which invoice, and also, heaven forbid, avoiding any human error. As great as I think I am, and my mother keeps reminding me that I am, I know that sometimes I make mistakes. So the QuickBooks integration gets rid of that, makes sure that the integration is seamless, automatically matches that, takes the manual effort from your bookkeeper or from you if you're doing it yourself. So that way you have more time to focus on the high level reports, crunching the numbers within the report section, or buying new items, being more strategic. By all means, if there's anything else I can help with, let me know. Thanks.